everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new. My name is Kristen, this is my booktube, and in today's video we are going to be talking about the books that I read in May. So this is actually my second time filming this video. I did film it last week. I was not at home, so I didn't have my regular setup to use, and it definitely showed. The audio was bad, the video quality was bad, the lighting was bad, everything was bad. So I just decided to scrap the video, and we're gonna try again now to film, edit, and upload this one for this week's upload. We don't have many books to talk about with this particular reading wrap-up. However, I did still manage to yap for 45 minutes in the first iteration of this video recording. So just because there's not many books does not mean that I don't have much to say, because as you probably would know if you've been around for a while, I like to yap, and there is a lot to yap about with these books that I read. So without further ado, we're just gonna go ahead and jump on into talking about the 3 books that I finished in May. I did start several other books, I just did not finish them within the confines of the month of May. And as per usual, we're going to go from the lowest rated to the highest rated books. And the first book that I'm going to talk about today is An Appointment with Death by Agatha Christie. So this particular Poirot mystery centers around a murder in the Middle East, specifically at the Cliffs of Petra. And I'm not gonna lie, this did give me Murder in Mesopotamia vibes a little bit. Mostly in the setting of the story, like visually in my brain, it looked very similar. And that does make sense because it's in the same general geographic region. So in An Appointment with Death, it's very interesting to me, at least the way this one started, because it opens up with a longer section that precedes the actual murder, and we really get to know our main cast of characters a lot more before the murder actually occurs, which I did appreciate. I thought that was a good way to introduce the characters, because we got to know a little bit more about their dynamics with each other. And it really did a good job of making you more suspicious of the people around the person that gets murdered. She is the matriarch of a family, and this family is on vacation. And despite the way that she treats her children, they are fully grown. I think they are all in their mid-20s or older, but even so, she still rules over the house with an iron fist, at least to the point where her children pretty much do whatever she tells them to do, and she is a bit tyrannical in the way that she orders them around, at least in my opinion. And as we are getting this glimpse into the dynamics of this family, we get to see what motivations each character would potentially have to get rid of their mother or mother-in-law, because as I said before, they're all adults, and so there are in-laws present too that also do not like their mother-in-law. And they even have direct conversations about how life would be easier if she just weren't around anymore. Poirot obviously is also in the same expedition group. It seems like it's kind of like a all-inclusive kind of vacation scheme where you can add on different excursions, and the Cliffs of Petra is one of these excursions. So Poirot is part of this tourist group and does overhear some of the family talking about how she really does need to be taken care of and murdered. So that's not a good look if you're talking about how someone needs to be murdered, and then a short while later they turn up murdered. So right off the bat, we have suspicions about pretty much everyone that is even remotely close to this woman. So the tourist group goes on this excursion to the Cliffs of Petra, and uncharacteristically, the matriarch actually lets her family kind of do whatever they want. She is generally the type to direct everyone in her family on vacation, basically planning out the entire thing, telling them what they're going to do, and not really seemingly giving them any choice in the matter. So her saying that she just wants to basically sun on a chair at the top of the cliffs and the family can go and do whatever they want is pretty out of character for her. And as the family goes their separate ways, that is when the murderer strikes. And by 6 p.m. that day, she is dead, and we have a whole cast of suspects who have a lot of motive for wanting her dead. Poirot does what he does best, and he starts investigating. And there is a lot of finger pointing, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of accusations being thrown around. But in the end, I will say that the murder was a bit of a surprise. This one really was more in the camp where there were just red herrings flying around everywhere, and the actual solution was something that you really couldn't have pieced together yourself. So I think that's my biggest complaint with this book. It was still an entertaining read, and I did enjoy the pacing of this one a little bit more, I would say, just because the other Poirot mysteries hit the ground running so fast that it's sometimes hard to keep up with the characters and who's related to who and who has what motivation, because you're just kind of thrown in the deep end the same as Poirot is. But this one really took its time in the beginning to showcase those relationships a bit more, so that by the time the murder actually happened and we're deep in the investigation portion of the book, you have a better idea of the dynamics between the different members of the family. That being said, I did end up giving this book 3.5 stars out of 5. I thought it was better than the average Agatha Christie book that I've read. It was a bit more memorable just because the structure was a bit different, but in the end, it still was pretty middle of the road, and I definitely think that I will be getting this one mixed up with Murder in Mesopotamia in my head the farther away from reading it that I get. The next book that I read in May was actually a reread in preparation for a new read, and that is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. You would have probably heard me mention that I'm doing a reread of this book in preparation for Sunrise on the Reaping, which I am a couple hours into now, and oh my goodness, I have so many thoughts. I have had many a freak out session while listening to the audiobook and driving, and because of that, I am taking it extremely slow, like a snail's pace, because I can't make like 5 minutes worth of progress in this book without something being mentioned that just like sends me into a tizzy, because I'm like making connections between the first book and Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and like it's just getting my gears turning a lot, and it's a little bit overwhelming, I'm gonna be completely honest. Like there are some very, very small details that are mentioned in like one line in Sunrise on the Reaping that just stick in my mind, because I just know that it is a reference to something else in the series. I definitely think that I want to do distinct videos about the Hunger Games series. I don't know exactly how I want to structure that just yet, but I do really want to do some sort of deep dive into the series, just because I am losing my mind actively while reading Sunrise on the Reaping, and I definitely feel like this book is a linchpin in a lot of themes that span across the entire series. And it's going to provide a lot of new information that bridges the gap between The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and the first Hunger Games book. And Suzanne Collins just has such a good way of subtly weaving those in throughout Sunrise on the Reaping. She does a really good job of just making the slightest references that, if you weren't paying attention for whatever reason, are so easy to miss. It just does so much to connect the stories for me in particular. So I have a lot to say about Sunrise on the Reaping, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, the Hunger Games as a whole. So I feel like it would just be better to make dedicated videos for each of those that are more deep dives. However, that will take a lot more work on my end, a lot of writing, a lot of rereading, so that'll have to wait until I have time. I'm hoping that maybe by the time the movie comes out for Sunrise on the Reaping, I can have enough time to work on a series like that, but it is a big undertaking. It's something that I've never really done before, so not gonna lie, I'm a little scared to do it. But I feel like I have the right kind of dysfunctional brain to hyperfixate on this for long enough to basically write whole essays about each of the books. So I'm probably gonna do that at some point. I don't know how many people are interested in like deep dive breakdowns of these books, but there is just so much I want to talk about with these that I feel like I need to do some sort of deep dive. And especially because I am now reading Sunrise on the Reaping, I feel like going back and rereading The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes again after reading this book is going to be changed after I read this one as well. And then before you ask, yes, I am planning on rereading the original trilogy because, I mean, Sunrise on the Reaping is going to fundamentally change the way I see Haymitch as a character. So I feel like I have to reread the original trilogy now that we have a whole book that really digs into the background of Haymitch Abernathy. And I'm only like 3 hours in and I'm already like low-key a little emotionally traumatized, and the games haven't even started yet in the book. So it's gonna be an emotional journey for sure, which is another reason why I think the big breakdowns of these videos will probably take me a little bit. But nonetheless, I do really want to do some sort of like Mike's Mike style breakdown of the books where I go into a little bit more detail about the connections between each of the books. I'll probably end up sounding and looking a lot like Charlie Day in the Pepe Sylvia episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but you know what? It's better to channel that energy into a YouTube video than to just scream in my apartment, I guess. So I'm going to subject you all to that as well. Look forward to that, I guess. But anyways, my reread of The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was really good. It is always interesting to go back and reread a book like The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes after you have finished it the first time, just because there's things that you probably didn't pick up on before. There's more of a dramatic irony now that you know how the story ends and how each character's story plays out. And overall, I would still give this a 4 out of 5 stars. I think that, like I said before, as a standalone book, I do think that it is a good book overall. However, I think that where this book really shines is in the context that it adds to the series as a whole. It is truly a prequel in that this is really just expanding on the lore of the Hunger Games as a concept and really gives us a deeper background on the main overarching villain of the trilogy, President Snow. And I think it does a really good job of showing the pivotal moment in Coriolanus's life where he really decided to go full force into his darker, more self-centered, egotistical, nihilistic evil side that we have come to know all too well by the end of Mockingjay. So it's really showing us the path that he took to get to where he is by the time the 74th Hunger Games rolls around. And once again, in The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Suzanne Collins, especially at the end, really plants those seeds so that you can see the trajectory that his life takes in the next 64 years until Katniss's games come around. Because at the end of The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, it seems like it's wrapping up like very quickly, and it's like a very fast "where are they now" screen credit at the end of a movie. But all of those details are very important. Like Coriolanus ending up at the university studying under Dr. Gall, him becoming head game maker, and really setting up his ascent into power. And then if you flash forward to Catching Fire and Mockingjay, we get Finnick telling us more about Coriolanus's rise to power as well. So she's really bridging the gap between those two lore dumps, if you want to call them that, of Coriolanus's past to really show us his rise to power in the most efficient way possible, I guess you could say. Because instead of writing whole chapters where she talks about the different changes that he makes to the games, once we find out he becomes head game maker, we can pretty much assume that most, if not all, of the changes that have taken place between the 10th and the 74th Hunger Games were directly related to Coriolanus in some way, shape, or form. If he is studying under Dr. Gall, who implemented the games to begin with, and has a hand in how the games are designed, how things are changed from year to year to make them more entertaining, which is a psychotic notion in itself to try to make children murdering each other more entertaining so people will watch it. We just know that Coriolanus has a hand in all of it. And then by the time we get to Sunrise on the Reaping, which takes place 40 years after The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, he is already president of Pan Am. So before the age of 60, he has already reached the presidency and is the most powerful man in the nation. And as Haymitch says himself, and also by virtue, the cruelest man in Pan Am, which is a far cry from the conflicted Coriolanus that we get in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I really enjoy the way that Suzanne Collins does her storytelling. I always have since I read the very first Hunger Games book when I was like 15. So that is no different for the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and also Sunrise on the Reaping that I am currently reading. But yes, all that to say, I did a reread of the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I am back in my Hunger Games obsessed era, and that will more than likely be reflecting in some of the content that I upload in the future. But in any case, that is enough about the Hunger Games for this video. You best believe that I will be talking about it more in future videos, but for now, we're done talking about the Hunger Games, and we will move on to the final book that I finished in May, which is Dark Matter. Dark Matter centers around a college quantum physics professor named Jason Desson, and he lives in Chicago with his wife and teenage son, Charlie. And one night when he attends a celebration at a bar for one of his college friends who won this prestigious academic award, he gets kidnapped on his way home. He is forced to drive at gunpoint to an abandoned power plant outside of the city, where the masked man is asking him some very weird questions for someone who is kidnapping him. Are you happy in your life? How is your relationship with your wife? Tell me about your son. Are you happy? Are they happy? All things that you wouldn't really think that a kidnapper or someone who plans to do you harm would really want to ask you. But nonetheless, this culprit is very curious about Jason's life. And once they get to the power plant, Jason is then ordered to strip naked before the kidnapper injects him with some mysterious clear liquid that knocks him out. And when he wakes up again, he is in a hospital bed that he does not recognize, surrounded by people that he does not know, who are congratulating him on making his way back, saying that they haven't seen him in a long time and asking him about where he was, what he experienced. And as you would expect, this freaks Jason out a little bit. So he takes off running, makes his way back to his house, only to realize that the house that he's in, though it is his address, it's in the right location, and he has the keys for it, so it is in fact his house, looks completely different from the last time he saw it. Where family photos once hung, there is now artwork displayed instead. Things that were run down and really rickety about the house have been replaced. A lot of the house has been remodeled and made to look very sleek and modern and expensive. All things that Jason could never afford to do. And then Jason starts to realize that he has somehow been transported into a parallel world where he is not a physics professor at a local college, he is not married to his wife Danielle, and he does not have a son named Charlie. Nay. In this world, Jason focused on quantum physics instead of building a family. And he is now a world-renowned and very wealthy quantum physicist. And the rest of the book is basically about him fighting his way back to his world, his version of Chicago, so that he can be with his family again. This book really surprised me, to be quite honest. I have seen this book around for a very long time. It's been out for a very long time. It came out in like 2016, but I have never read it because I personally am not a big fan of science fiction. And I always thought that this book was more science fiction-y than anything else, but really at the core of the story, it is a thriller with a bit of a love story and some science fiction, like all blended together into one book. So it was a lot different than I anticipated in the best way possible. This was a book that we read for my work book club, and everyone that came to the book club meeting gave it 4+ stars, and I'm no exception to that. I ended up giving it 4.5, and even that group is not really into science fiction. There were a couple people in there who said they've literally never read a sci-fi book or seen a sci-fi movie before because they just were like, yeah, sci-fi is not for me. And they were pleasantly surprised by this book. And that is something that I totally agree with as well. I really went into this book without many expectations. I read the synopsis and stuff, but I was really wary of it being too sci-fi heavy and just like completely losing me at some point, but it did a really good job of keeping the really technical sci-fi jargon that would make my eyes glaze over to a low enough level to where it didn't really turn me off of the book at all. I would definitely say that this is predominantly a thriller, which is my preferred genre of books, so that also helped keep me engaged, because as soon as there was like some sciencey stuff happening, Jason had to get on the run because people were hunting him down. So that in itself really kept the book exciting and kept the pace really fast as well. So like I said, I gave the book 4.5 stars. I thought it was really good. I didn't think that it was perfect by any means. There were a couple things that happened on this journey that I was like, I don't know if that makes a ton of sense. And then also there's a bit of a cliffhanger at the end, and I selfishly wanted more of a resolve than what we got at the end of the book. But I know that that was like deliberate and the author did that on purpose, so I couldn't really knock it that much. So yeah, that's pretty much it for all of the books that I read in May. Overall, they were all three pretty good books. I wasn't really dissatisfied with any of them, and that is reflected in the ratings that I gave them as well. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and leave a like down below. Let me know. You should also subscribe while you're down there because I put out new videos pretty much every single week. And yeah, I hope you guys are having a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!